Hi guys, welcome to a new segment of Guarani Vision where we're going to start talking about some historic players, clubs, anecdotes from Paraguayan football, just a bit more information that might be out there in Spanish, but we're trying to give you some of that info in English. And today we're starting with possibly the greatest Paraguayan player to never play for the Albiroja. He has the record for the most goals in a single season in Argentinian football. Nobody in Argentinian football has scored more goals than them in their career. He was idolized by Alfredo di Stefano, who said, "I want to be a number 9 just like my idol." The legendary Uruguayan journalist Eduardo Galeano said he jumped like he had secret springs in his body. And his nickname is indeed Saltarin Rojo, the jumping red, because of his tremendous heading ability playing for most of his career in the red shirt of Independiente. We're talking, of course, about Arsenio Erico, and this is his story. Arsenio Erico was born 30th of March 1915, and aged just 15, he made his debut for Club Nacional in Barrio Obrero in Asunción. His story, his road to fame could have been very different because in 1932, war broke out in Paraguay. It's something called the Guerra del Chaco between Paraguay and Bolivia. And like thousands of young Paraguayans at the time, he was conscripted and sent by train to the arid Chaco region to fight the Bolivians. Overall, around 50,000 Paraguayans would die in this war, many dying of thirst in what was one of the hottest and most remote regions on earth, and a very tragic war. But Arsenio Erico was saved by football. In fact, he didn't spend a day on the front line. Once he got to Puerto Casado in the Chaco, he was enlisted to the Paraguayan Red Cross football team. A commander had recognized him from his days at Nacional, and he sent them on a tour to Uruguay and Argentina to try and raise funds for injured soldiers. Overall, they played 26 games on the tour, and all the big clubs were interested in signing this amazing Paraguayan sensation who was playing so well in the exhibition games. River Plate were very interested, but it was Independiente that managed to sign him in the Bombonera of all places. At first, a lieutenant colonel who was in charge of the touring group said that Erico would be charged with desertion if he accepted an offer and stayed in Argentina instead of returning to Paraguay. But money talks, I guess, because in the end he signed for 12,000 pesos, which was a huge sum at the time, and he was given a 5,000 signing on fee, which he quickly donated to the Red Cross. I guess the Red Cross never thought that tour would end up being so lucrative. Just a month later, in 1934, he made his debut. It was maybe an inconspicuous inaugural season. He only managed 12 goals, but he started raising eyebrows the year later in 1935. He scored 22 goals in just 18 games, including 6 in one match against Quilmes, and they finished second behind Boca. The golden seasons of Independiente and Arsenio Erico were definitely the 1937 to 39 period, where he managed 40 or more goals in the 3 consecutive years, including that record-breaking 47 goals in the first year. Independiente then won back-to-back titles in 38 and 39, which was the first time they'd ever done that in their history. He was so good and feared by Paraguay's neighbors, Argentina, that in 1937, AFA didn't actually let him go and play for the Albiroja, because they wanted to make sure they were going to win the South American Championship, now called the Copa America. In fact, Argentina beat Paraguay 6-1 in Buenos Aires en route to becoming champions. A year later, they changed tact, and the Albiceleste actually offered Arsenio Erico money to go and play in that year's World Cup in 1938. Paraguay wasn't in the competition, so it must have been a tempting offer. Actually, a former colleague of his from Nacional had represented Argentina in 1934. But Arsenio stayed true to his roots and didn't play for Argentina. I guess we've seen one of the funny stories about Erico is like many players that leave their home country so young, sometimes they're not as recognized as they should be back in their native in their native country, and maybe people doubt their ability, especially in times before television. Many Paraguayans wouldn't have seen Erico in the playing live until he visited Asunción on a tour with the club in 1941. They ended up playing his old club Nacional and actually lost the first game to the Academia. So in the rematch, the fans started taunting him and from the stands and shouting at him in Guarani, "Vuro Reico," which would be like, "What a load of rubbish." So his reaction from Erico was, "Let's score a hat-trick," and he led the team to a 4-3 victory. He certainly didn't hold any grudge against his former team Nacional. In fact, he would return a year later, and he dragged them to the league title via a playoff in a very difficult season in 1942. He then also returned for one final season in 1949, but couldn't cap it with a glorious victory for Nacional because they drew their final game of the season and ended up just 1 point behind eventual champions Guarani. In retirement, Arsenio Erico went back to Argentina, where he'd of course lived most of his life, but stayed away from football, resisting a temptation to kind of be a coach or be very involved with the industry. He actually ended up opening a cafe in the Ramos Mejia neighborhood. He would sell kind of coffee, sweets and everything. And in his house in Merlo, he would often have guests who'd come from Paraguay that were visiting that needed some kind of support. He would lend them shirts, ties, even let them use his car. And there's one anecdote that said if he came home late from working in the cafe and somebody was asleep on his bed, he wouldn't want to disturb them. He would just pull out a fold-out bed and lay there and sleep there. Which is amazing when you think of this stardom and this fame that he had in his playing days. But this personality is actually something that was recognized even by Di Stefano when he was very young. Once he gave an interview saying that he remembered when he was still in the 4th division, he mentioned that his idol was Arsenio Erico and that he wanted to play like him. And one day the Paraguayan found him while he was waiting for the bus to go home from training, and he said, "I saw you play the other day. I liked it, kid. Keep that up and you'll go far." So the ever humble Arsenio Erico certainly wasn't wrong, because we all know what Di Stefano ended up doing in his playing career. In death, like in life, there was a tussle between the neighboring countries over the great Arsenio Erico. While he died in Buenos Aires in 1977, it wasn't until 2008 that Argentinian authorities allowed his body to be expatriated to Paraguay, which is his final resting place. His coffin can now be visited. It's in the Defensores del Chaco Stadium, and there he is in the national stadium, probably the greatest Paraguayan to never play for the Albiroja.